Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the book, "The Gate of the Feral Gods," which is the fourth book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I think it's the fourth book. I've lost track. Authors, do me a favor. Just name your book Dungeon Crawler Carl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, that goes for movies too, by the way. Anyway. Let's talk about what I look for when I read a book. I actually look for two things. I look for, first off, I want a coherent plot. I want a plot that actually makes sense from beginning to end. I want to have a plot that, that my, if you can see it here. She's not. Allie has decided to come help us visit. Anyway, one thing I look like I said, I'm looking for a plot. I really hate these postmodernist books like Don DeLillo's White Noise or stuff like that emphasize the idea of a plotless book. I really hate that. I want a coherent plot. Very, very rarely will I like a book without any plot at all. The second thing I look for is characters. I want characters that I enjoy hanging out with. If I'm going to read a 600-page novel, I want to, be around characters that I enjoy being around. I remember watching a movie. It was one of these really bad movies, Curse of the Confederate Cannibals or something like that. But within the first 5 minutes of the movie, I remember thinking to myself, "Oh joy, these rednecks are going to be fun to hang out with for 2 hours," and I was right about it. And to be honest with you, like I said, I want characters that I enjoy. I want them to change and grow over time. I want character arcs. I get that that's not realistic. Real life doesn't have character arcs or 3-act structures, but we're talking fictional novels here, so that's what I look for when I'm looking for when I'm reading a book. So far I gotta say, this series of Dungeon Crawler Carl has truly delivered on both of those. Each book has a coherent plot in it, and each book actually moves the characters forward in their arcs. So what is the plot of this book? Well, after surviving the last floor of the dungeon, Carl, Donut, and Katia find themselves in a new level, where they're presented with their main objective is to storm a castle that's floating in the air. There are 3 other objectives the other crawlers on this level are taking care of. So Carl gathers together all the other crawlers in his level, and they go about doing that. And I really don't want to go too heavily into the plot here because I really don't want to give away a whole lot of spoilers. But one of the things that we start to really dig into, we kind of touched upon this in the last book, but in this one we start actually getting to know the NPCs, and we start finding out exactly how truly evil this is, because these NPCs are living beings that have just been implanted with memories to think that they've always been there when they really haven't. They're just actors that have been forced into this. And a lot of them are getting killed. A lot of them, get destroyed. It's really not that great of a system, to be honest with you. And I fully agree with Carl's take on it, that this is really not a great thing. During the course of this plot, Carl comes into the possession of 3 parts of what's called the Gate of the Feral Gods. And one of the things about this gate is that you can open up a portal to anywhere else, which is really great. The only drawback is that once you open up the portal, what's called a feral god can escape the abyss. These gods are, the first one that comes out is not really crazy or bad or anything. It's just simply a huge puppy, a huge shoe-headed puppy, and it's really cute. And but I mean, by most of the gods that come out of this are both insane and huge and very powerful. And one of the things about these pharaoh gods is that they've been banished to this abyss because they've done something wrong. Which, the second they get out, that obviously attracts other gods to try and put them back. So let's just put it this way: fireworks ensue towards the end. And like I said, I really don't want to get into spoilers because I'm going to tell you right now, this is a recommended read. So definitely, read the book to find out what happens. One thing to keep an eye on, though, is in the epilogue. The epilogue seems to heavily expand the overarching plot of these books, and it expands it to the point where it's really going to be interesting to see how that is, how that is finished. Since I'm not going to talk about what this is more deeply about until the end of the entire series, because obviously I can't talk about that until I know the entire story. I do want to say that I've noticed a couple developing themes in this book. In this book, Donut was more or less sidelined as far as her character went, because she went through a lot of character growth in the last book. And I will also say she's going through a lot of character growth in the book after it. But there is one thing that I noticed that I know is picked up in the next book, and I hope is really dug into a lot more, is how Donut is really getting attached to Mongo, the dinosaur. And the fact is, Carl sees Mongo more as a pet. And considering Donut's history of being a pet, she's seeing Mongo as something more. And I'm kind of curious to see where that dynamic goes, over time. The other thing that I noticed is that Carl's starting to be much more devious in his planning. We've seen the fact that Carl can actually plan ahead really well. But before this book, Carl's plans were more short term of how do we defeat this boss. In this book, we start to see how he can plan much further ahead, and how his plans can be a lot more devious, and how he can use the rules of the dungeon to his own advantage. And I'm curious to see where that would goes, because there is one of his plots in this book really is a strike back against the Borant Corporation that's doing this to him, and I'm really curious to see where that goes. At the same time, I'm almost unsure as to whether that's a good sign for Carl or not, because, well, that ability to plan far in advance is a good thing, because it's going to keep him, Carl, Kadia, and the rest of the crawlers alive. It also could signify, if he goes wrong, the ability that he could really do some damage to other people if he's not careful. And he also seems to be acting more and more. He has plans, but his plans are becoming more and more grandiose and dangerous. That's all I'll say on that one. We'll find out where that goes in future books. So my overall review: yes, definitely read this book. This is another great entry in this series. I love this series beyond belief. We get a really rollicking adventure, some really solid character growth for Carl, and a little bit for Donut. I do have a couple complaints. If I was forced to come up with complaints about this book, I could only come up with two, and they're very minor. One is that Kadia goes through some pretty major character growth in this book, but she does it off screen, and I kind of don't like that. But at the same time, I realize there's only so many pages in this book, And in all honesty, the book is called Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's not called Dungeon Crawler Carl and Katia and Donut and the rest of the crawlers. So, the fact that Katia goes through character development off screen, I can take that as long as I see where it goes in future books. And there is one minor gripe that I have with a scene that happens. It happens in a boss fight underwater in a submarine. Another character, tertiary character that you really don't have to care too much about, uses an escape pod. And if you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the question that occurs to me is, how did a deadly jellyfish get into the escape pod as he rocketed through it? It's like, is it open on the sides or what? But so I mean, it's like, if somebody knows the answer to that one, leave it in the comments, because I can't figure it out. The only thing I can figure it out is that the escape pod is open on the sides. I have no idea. But other than that, this is a definite read. Definitely pick it up. It gets an A+ from me. So thanks a lot. Remember to keep reading, be kind, and stay weird. And I'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.